Welcome to a new wave of entrepreneurship. I'm Scott Sturt, founder and CEO of Venture for Canada and your host. The focus of this podcast is to hear from changemakers and young Canadian entrepreneurs to learn how they develop their entrepreneurial mindset and skills. In season 1, we'll be chatting with young Canadians about their entrepreneurial journey as Venture for Canada Fellow Alumni. I'm excited to dive into these conversations about how to foster your entrepreneurial mindset and drive. Welcome, Manuela, to a new wave of entrepreneurship. We are so grateful to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. Thanks for having me. This is very exciting.
Awesome. We hope that you're having a happy new year and a great start to 2021. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of some of the questions, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. So if we haven't met yet, for the listeners, my name is Manuela Bárcenas, and I'm a content marketing manager at fellow.app. And Fellow is a software company that helps managers and their teams run productive meetings and exchange feedback. And as Scott might maybe talk a little bit more about, I'm actually a Venture for Canada alumni. So I found my job at Fellow thanks to Venture for Canada, and I couldn't be more thankful.
Awesome. Thanks, Manuel. We're so thankful and appreciative of you being part of the Venture for Canada community. And many fellows since then have come into the program through Manuela's recommendations. So thanks for the kind words, Manuela, and back at you. So my first question is, how, on the theme of kind of management, is how can a manager make the transition from being a boss to a coach?
Yeah, so in my work as a content marketing manager at Fellow, I have to do a lot of research on management, right? And we actually interview a lot of people, throughout the year. And we did have a manager chat. So one of these Twitter chats that I was telling you about this transition from manager to coach, because I feel that people our age expect a lot from their managers. Like, they don't want to have a manager who is just a boss giving them instructions and telling them what to do. We want managers who coach us on our skills and who can help us develop and grow professionally, right? So if you're a manager and you want to help employees develop and grow professionally, if you want to become a coach, I think the most important thing you can do is actually have these career conversations, right? Like, ask people on your team, what are your career goals? Where do you see yourself in 3 years? How can they help you get there, right? So if someone on your team tells you, my dream would be to lead a team, for example, then you can start helping that person develop certain leadership skills so they can get there in the future, right? So I think it's just important to remember people want managers who can really coach them on their skills and help them with their professional future. And if you're a manager, this is something you should always keep in mind. And of course, use feedback as a tool to always help the person. So if someone tells you their goal, maybe whenever you have constructive feedback for them, you can always tie it back to that goal, right? Like, okay, I want to help you become that person. If you want to get to that level, I think you need to be doing X and Y, right?
Yeah, those are great points. As a follow-up, what do you think are the biggest mistakes that managers tend to make?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think mistake number one, especially in a remote world, would be to forget that there's an actual human behind the screen. Like, this is something we've heard a lot from our community. Like, a lot of managers are delegating tasks, maybe just like checking in on their teams to see if they're doing the work, but they're not actually asking them about their well-being. Like, hey, like, how is it going with you and your family? You know, like, maybe their kids are home, maybe they need to like rearrange their work schedule because they have other priorities. So I think one common mistake nowadays that most of us are working from home is not asking these questions, like, hey, how can I support you? Like, do you need anything? Does anything need to change for you to be successful, right? And I think another common mistake is also related to not asking about the employees' motivations. So one of my favorite interviews in our podcast, Super Managers, was Sarah Varney, who is the CMO at Twilio. And she said that some people are motivated by money and some people are motivated by, building like a family, and maybe their job is like a tool to do that. And maybe some people are really motivated by career advancement and becoming a manager. So as a manager or team lead, you really need to ask those questions to help to help yourself understand what motivates each person on your team. And if someone is really motivated by salary, then you can motivate them through that, right? But if someone is really motivated by professional challenges and new opportunities, maybe you can motivate them like that. So I think one common mistake that we see is managers trying to manage everyone like with the same management style, when people actually have different motivations, different personalities, and as a manager you need to ask those questions to help you get to know them.
Agreed. I've found that too. Every person is unique, and every person requires a slightly different management style.
I'm sure you've experienced this at Venture for Canada, right? Like every person requires different things and every person is motivated by different things.
Absolutely. I have definitely found that myself. Following up on one thing you said, Manuela, is, and I completely agree, I think it's super important that managers and their reports build strong personal relationships. There's a lot of research that shows, for instance, trust is much more likely to take place when people like each other personally, which is intuitive, but it's good to see that it's backed up by research. A related question is how, especially in this remote world that we're currently operating in, what tips do you have for managers in how they can build that positive kind of personal rapport and kind of friendly relationship with their direct reports, especially in the context of some cases they've never met their direct reports ever in person.
I think the most important thing a manager can do is, like, as soon as for example, let's say you're a manager and you're starting at a new company, schedule recurring one-on-one meetings with each person on your team. Like you might have seen Fellow, like at Fellow, we're huge advocates of one-on-one meetings because we actually think they are one of the tools managers have to really develop this trust with their teammates, right? So I'm going to give you an example. When I joined Fellow, I was reporting directly to Aiden, who is the CEO. And every 2 weeks, we had a one-on-one meeting where we just talked about my professional development, maybe challenges that I was encountering, maybe feedback that I had about processes or the company. And this really built a strong relationship with him, to the point that I felt very confident to share feedback with him, even tell him like, hey, you said this the other day and I didn't agree with it very much, but this is why, and this is what I think we should do about it. And I think if managers don't have those frequent one-on-one meetings to talk to people, then that trust won't be there. And I have the same relationship now with Erin, who is my manager now. We have a meeting every 2 weeks where I build the agenda as the direct report. I come prepared with all the things I want to talk to her about. And I think if we didn't have those meetings, I wouldn't have the trust to have those awkward and difficult conversations that sometimes you need to have at work.
Absolutely. And trust is as one person once said to me, things only move at the speed of trust. And it's so important. So that's great advice, Manuela.
It's important in startups too, right? I know a lot of our listeners are probably in the startup world, and in startup, like, things need to move fast, and you cannot wait to maybe share feedback with your manager or share feedback with someone on your team, because you might be delaying a process, or we like to call them feedback loops. Like the more you communicate, the more feedback loops you're gonna create in your company.
Absolutely. One a kind of related question around management is, what tips do you have for managers in writing and doing annual performance reviews?
Yeah, this is a really good question because everyone has to go through this process, right? So first of all, I would encourage people to create a document that we talked about before, like a Hive document where they keep track of their accomplishments. But something that I learned from Alexandra Sunderland, which I'm going to mention again, an engineering manager at Fellow, is that she keeps track of her direct reports accomplishments. So she has a document where she keeps track of the great things that her team has done, as well as some moments where maybe she has shared constructive feedback with them, right? So she keeps track of that. And then when performance reviews come, it won't be hard for you as a manager to prepare, because you already have this document with all the good things that the person did and also the things that they could work on for the future. So I think preparing like that is my number one tip. And obviously make it a two-way conversation. So I know a lot of managers make the mistake of showing up to these performance reviews and telling people, this is what you did right, this is what you did wrong, and that's it. But something we like to do at Fellow is our own software has like a tool where you can ask for feedback, right? So in our case, I'm going to give you a specific example. My manager sends me a feedback form about myself, and then she fills in that form with, about her direct reports. So when we show up to the performance review, we've all answered the same questions, and that makes it a two-way conversation because I've already thought about it, right?
Yeah, that's great. At Venture for Canada, we follow a similar process. And by the way, from a manager perspective, I also am a big fan of that, keeping a running track through the year, because it's easy to forget about different things as they kind of come up, both constructive and good. And it's great to have. It's also a way to, I think otherwise it's really easy for performance reviews to become very biased to how the person did in the previous month.
Yeah, in the context of performance reviews, this is called recency bias.
Yeah, which is a powerful bias in many different things, but definitely in particular in performance reviews.
Yeah,
even what happened the day before, right?
Let's say someone like was having a tough week the week before their performance review. Like they did something that's wrong. If you as a manager weren't keep track of all these awesome accomplishments, maybe you could be like a little biased in the moment of having this conversation. But if you're actually keeping track of all the good things as well as the constructive feedback, then it's a more balanced and fair conversation.
Absolutely. So just kind of shifting gears to a next topic is we're going to talk about habits. And one person who I realized we have a shared fondness for is James Clear. And his book, Atomic Habits, which highly recommend. It is an amazing book. So my first question to you is, what were your main takeaway, or what are your main takeaways from reading Atomic Habits that you think our listeners should know about?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're a fan of James Clear, because I love Atomic Habits. I love his newsletter, which is another great resource if people want to check it out. Every Thursday, he writes some really great emails. But yeah, Atomic Habits seriously has been one of those books that really changed my mindset. And I think my favorite takeaway is the concept of identity-based habits. So basically telling yourself, I am the type of person that does X, instead of, for example, saying, oh, I want to lose weight in 2021. Like, no, that's a very like short-term goal. If you tell yourself, I am the person who works out every morning, or I am the type of person who takes care of their body, then your habits are more likely to last, right? Because it's not like a short-term goal. You're actually building an identity. So for myself, like the fitness identity has worked really well. Like when I started telling myself, I am someone who takes care of their own health and who will exercise every morning to start the day, right? It's not about how I look or the weight or, stuff like that, but it's about who you are. And it's also really worked very well for like my reading habits. Like I'm the type of person who is always learning.
Absolutely, those are great. And on the sharing my own personal experience about the exercise one is up until maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I was around 40 pounds heavier than I am now. And one of the things I did was this is before James Clear, but this is partly why his book resonated with me, is I adopted a thing where I said 6 days a week I will exercise we'll exercise 6 days a week. And I actually have a laminated thing on my wallet, which I've carried since 2013 in my wallet, which has a few other things in it. But one of it says, I will exercise 6 times a week. And it's this, and now I think my partner sometimes thinks I'm fanatic about it, because we'll be, have to leave somewhere at like, 6:30 in the morning. I'll wake up like at 4 a.m. because it's the only time, but it's because it's part of my identity, right? Like I feel like I'm failing myself if I don't do it.
And it's even better if you tell others about it, right? Because now you feel like you're failing yourself and other people. So yeah, James Clear talks about habit trackers and like just keeping track of your habits. So I created a private Instagram account where only like my maybe 5 best friends follow me. And every time I work out, I post a picture of my Apple Watch. And that's my habit tracker. And it's worked so well for me, because now I feel like not only I have this identity towards myself, but also like my group of like 5 best friends who see these pictures every day, right?
That's a fantastic idea. I
Yeah.
really like that. And it's a great way to keep in touch with your closest,
With
friends,
your
particularly if
closest
they live in
friends.
different places.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a really, really good idea. One, I guess, related question, kind of beyond sort of fitness, what are other habits that you're currently working to develop?
Yeah. One that I actually want to develop this year is to create, like, build a habit of learning more about content marketing specifically. Like, I want to specialize in this field. So I want to make it a habit to read about it and to actually spend time building my skills. You know what I mean? So I want to build a habit of at least once a week, I sit down and I only consume content on content marketing. So it's a habit that I'm starting this year, and I build like a little habit tracker on Excel, like an Excel spreadsheet. We'll see how that goes, but I'm gonna be keeping track of that every week. And here's a fun fact for anyone who has one-on-one meetings with their manager. This is something else you can do. So at Fellow, we're huge advocates of using one-on-one meetings for professional development. So I told my manager, Erin, like every 2 weeks when we have our one-on-one meeting, I'm going to share with you 2 or 3 lessons about content marketing that I've learned in the past 2 weeks. So that's going to keep me accountable to stick to that goal.
On the topic of books and kind of learning,
Yeah.
and you seem like a kind of a voracious learner, and there's the term, what is it, autodidact, like somebody who loves like teaching
Yeah.
themselves new things. I definitely think you fall in that category. What are some other books that you recommend our listeners check out, and why?
Oh, yeah. There is a book. I don't know if people will see a video of this ever, but there's a book I have right here with me. It's called Mindset by Carol Dweck. And this is another book that seriously changed my life. It's a very simple concept, but just like changing your mindset to thinking any skill or any characteristic can be developed through practice and it's not set in stone. Just having that mindset can really change your perspective on anything. So it can change your perspective at work because now you know that you can develop any skill at work. It can also help your relationships because you know that with communication, you can improve anything in your relationships. So I think it's a great book for anyone who wants to check it out. Have you read it, Scott?
I have not read the specific book, but I have
Mhm.
read excerpts, and I am definitely familiar with growth mindset theory, and of which, for our listeners, for context, is that
Mhm.
in her research, she found that children who have growth mindset is a greater predictor of kind of success than like IQ and a lot of other kind of variables. In essence, that if you, for instance, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm bad at math," right? Like in
Yeah.
school. But if you reframe it to say, I can make myself better at math, then that is a bigger predictor of success than a lot of other things. Is that a good way to
Yeah.
describe it, Manuel?
For sure. It's just like the idea that you can get better at anything with dedication, practice, the right strategies, and mentors. Like you can get better at anything you want, right? And I think for me, this concept of the growth mindset has helped a lot when sometimes at work you get feedback from your manager or someone else. And some people, or as Carol Dweck explains in the book, people with a fixed mindset take it too personally, right? And they're too harsh on themselves because they would think, oh, I'm so bad at this, or I suck, you know? But people with a growth mindset take feedback in a way that is like beneficial to their growth because they take it as something that can help them. So if someone gives me feedback, I just take a look at it and think, you know what, if this person is giving me feedback, is because they see the potential in me to get better. And with dedication and learning, I can get to that next level, right? So I think that growth mindset can change a lot how you view feedback at work as well.
Absolutely. There's a great interview with Toby Luque, the founder of Shopify,
Mm-hmm.
that Tim Ferriss did. And in it, Toby Luque says the line, feedback is a gift. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
is such a powerful, sometimes when receiving feedback, it's really tough. But if you view
Mm-hmm.
each piece of feedback as kind of like a present, recognizing it's actually really
Yeah.
hard for the person, it's easier for somebody not to give feedback.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that's fantastic. And
Yeah, it's true.
great advice. Oh, you.
And I think it's so important to like for managers to learn how to give feedback, right? To like maybe ask the other person, is it the right time to share some feedback with you, or maybe like warn them like, hey, at our one-on-one meeting today, I would love to talk about what happened yesterday when you made mistake X and how we can move forward and improve for the future, right? Like just like warn people that you want to give them some feedback. That's a good practice. So I think it comes from like from each side. Like managers should learn how to give feedback more effectively, and people should also learn how to receive feedback and, like you said, take it as a gift.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One kind of sort of final question is, if you could go back in time and give advice to your 22-year-old self, what advice would you give and why?
First advice, join Venture for Canada. But I did that. So no, really, just like start earlier. So a lot of things in marketing I've actually learned on the job. like you said, just like teaching myself how to do certain things and looking online and learning from other people online. So if I could talk to my like 22-year-old self, I would tell her, just start early, start learning about marketing if that's something you're interested in online. Follow people on Twitter who are tweeting about marketing all the time. Follow people in the space, and also start building your, if you're passionate about building your personal brand and networking with people, start doing that early. You don't need to graduate university to do this. Like you can start building your website, have your own blog, start interacting with people on Twitter and LinkedIn. So that's something I would tell myself, just like start early, because at the end of the day, we're all learning as we go. And I've learned to be a marketer, not because I went not because I went to school for marketing, but because I've learned a lot of the things I know in the process. So yeah, I would tell myself that.
Absolutely. And it's funny on TikTok and
Yeah.
different things. It's pretty remarkable to see like 16-year-olds and like 15-year-olds
Yeah.
olds who are, very entrepreneurial and building kind of these
Yeah.
huge online
And
platforms.
on, yeah, Instagram and even Twitter, and I see them and I'm like, good for you, because I wish I did that earlier. And I'm sure that those people at the age of 30 are going to have like huge followings, communities that they're a part of, and probably like their own businesses. So I think start early is a good one. And people nowadays have a lot of tools to do that. Like you don't even need a website. You could start with Medium, like medium.com. You could start a blog there, and you don't even need to build your own website. So yeah, I would start earlier. I want to launch my personal blog this year very soon. So that's a goal that I have for myself, but I wish that I did it even before graduating university.
I agree. It's a great, and as to throw in a related recommendation is,
Yeah.
particularly if somebody has a unique name. Speaking as one of the only Scott Sturts in the world,
Yeah.
I highly recommend going into GoDaddy or whatever. Buy
Yeah.
your name at .com, .ca, whatever. It's a great resource to have. And then even if you don't create a website immediately, it's good to own your domain name
Your
and
domain name. I agree with you.
it's a great tool, and it's easier today to launch a website than ever before. So that's fantastic advice, Manuela. So just to kind of close off, I just want to say a big thank you to you, Manuela. You are such a positive, disciplined, creative
Thank you,
person.
Scott.
It's going to be really exciting to see as your career continues to grow and develop. And I think you provided a ton of really interesting insights today, both to me and to our listeners. So at this point, can you share to our listeners where they can find you and contact and learn more about you and your work?
For sure. So you can find me on basically any social media platform: Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, as Manuela Bárcenas. And when this episode airs, I'm 100% sure that my website will be live. So you can just type manuelabarcenas.com and you can also contact me through that. So I look forward to connecting with more people that are interested in Venture for Canada, people that are interested in the startup ecosystem, or simply people that are interested in habits like I am. So looking forward to that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Manuela. I wish you all the best through the rest of 2021. And thanks so much for coming on today and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks for having me, Scott. This was fun.
That's it for this week's episode of A New Wave of Entrepreneurship. Stay connected with us via our social and our email list. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss our next episode. If you have feedback on today's episode, tweet us at Venture4Canada, that is Venture, the number 4, Canada, or email us at podcast@venture4, that's spelled FOR, Canada.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. I'm Scott Sturt, and until next time, stay safe, stay motivated, and stay grateful. A New Wave of Entrepreneurship is produced by Juanita Lee Garcia and Latifa Farah. Editing and mixing also done by Latifa Farah. Erica Ormiston is our editorial assistant. Mark Wallach and Premium Beat own the copyright and publishing rights related to the song used in this podcast. The comments and opinions, recommendations, or suggestions expressed on the podcast by the guests are not liable to Venture for Canada and belong solely to each individual. Any information provided, stated by our guests and our host is independent of Venture for Canada. A New Wave of Entrepreneurship is a Venture for Canada brand, and all content is owned by Venture for Canada. If you'd like to use our content, please reach out to us at podcast@venture4, that's spelled FOR, Canada.ca.